I'll come up with a different name for us.
Thank
There
you,
you
Maya.
go. There you go. 'Cause that's the worst.
It makes me think retainer, which makes me think middle school, which makes me think
Mm-mm,
awkward.
mm-mm. I mean, it is awkward.
But there are some
But
things that we've transcended and we should continue to,
you
continuously
are
elevate.
correct. Yes, you are correct.
Yeah.
All right. Beyond retention. Yes, I love it. From thriving, right? We think beyond retention. Wouldn't it be nice if we didn't have to have a conversation about retention in this way? There we go. All right. Welcome, Dr. Dion. Aloha. Hi, Joel. Nice to have you on this. Welcome, everybody, to the space. Bienvenidos. We're issuing an invitation for folks to join us by introducing themselves in the chat. Thank you so much for logging on this afternoon or this morning. For those of us that might be on the Big Island or somewhere off the coast of the Pacific joining us as well today. Thank you. Dr. Burton, it's nice to see you on this call. I know it's been a while. Jill, pleasure to see you here as well. We have our folks from Tuva Labs. Thank you for joining us. Elena, nice to see you on this call as well. And the illustrious Dr. Bland, we're welcoming you to this space. Thank you so much. Excited to hear more about your work with Todos. Flagging on. We'll give it another minute or so, right, Mecca?
That sounds
Okay,
good.
wonderful. Yes. Welcome to our friends at First Lego League. You have a great, I think you have a great challenge this season. It should be an aquatic undersea challenge, I believe. Yes. Vanessa, welcome. You could teach us a lot about our topic today. We're happy to have you join us. I'm just shouting people out in the chat because this is such a lovely group to be having this conversation with today. So thank you for joining us. All right. All right, we started with a hearty bienvenidos from Dr. Ruiz, and we want to extend that to everybody today as we get started. I'm going to invite my colleague Mecca as we're welcoming people to the space to go ahead and kick us off, if that's okay, Mecca.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Maya. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Beyond 100K and U.S. Department of Education You Belong in STEM webinar. Our theme today is we're going to be discussing cultivating STEM classrooms of belonging, BIPOC STEM teacher representation and retention. As Maya noted, we have many experts on this topic who are serving as panelists today and who are also joining us as attendees. And we're so grateful to all of you for your presence. Really looking forward to a fruitful and strong conversation. So my name is Mecca Smith. I'm a senior policy advisor at the U.S. Department of Education. Again, really excited to dig into the conversation today during back to school season on a topic that's just so tightly linked to student engagement and student achievement. We all know that our educators matter more to student achievement than any other aspect or indicator of schooling. And the Department of Ed, like our partner Beyond100K, is committed to strengthening the educator workforce so that they are more reflective of our student population, so that our educators are excited to join in the field, excited to grow in the field, and feel really supported and encouraged to stay. This webinar is a part of the U.S. Department of Education's You Belong in STEM series. And this is where we have experts address root causes to a number of disparities that we are seeing and combating in STEM education. Many of those disparities really funnel through issues of belonging for our students and for our educators. And at the department, we are really reimagining strategies for recruiting and retaining excellent educators. That is one of our biggest challenges. It's one of our biggest opportunities, and the work that we have the privilege to do every day. It really crosses over a lot of our different work streams and our collective work priorities. We've actually taken 5 concrete steps to really drive impact in this space. So the first one is promoting teacher leadership and advancement opportunities. That includes distributive leadership models. Next, we've also been working really hard across multiple teams to increase compensation and working conditions. As a former teacher, this topic is very near to my own heart. And proud to announce that since the 21-22 academic year, at least 30 states and DC have taken steps at the state or the system level to really increase compensation. We're also working with states at the Department of Ed to create high quality and affordable pathways into the teaching profession. That includes apprenticeships and grow your own programs. And at the start of this administration, there were 0 statewide registered teacher apprenticeship models, and now there are 39. We are providing effective new teacher mentoring and ongoing job-embedded professional learning experiences for all of our educators, again, ensuring that they're feeling supported so that they can continue throughout their careers. And we're strengthening educator diversity throughout all of this work of teacher recruitment and teacher prep and teacher retention to really make sure that teaching is a STEM career, and it's a career that people from all backgrounds are really eager to pursue if they should want to. And we at the department have all of this work under the umbrella of our Raise the Bar priorities. We'll make sure that the link gets into the chat. We know that there's a lot of work to do still in all of these areas, especially on the last one, to make sure that our educators truly reflect the students they teach. And this ongoing challenges is really one of the core inspirations for our conversation today. In the spirit of raising awareness, I just want to say that we do believe that our budget is reflective of our priorities, and the department's resourcing on strengthening the educator profession includes securing nearly $2.7 billion in investments in our nation's teachers through our formula grants and our discretionary grant programs. That's an increase of $112 million since the beginning of this administration. And we've also awarded nearly $450 million to more than 260 grantees that were focused on educator diversity last year. We want to ground this conversation in some of those stats and some of that data by calling out some of the macro shifts that are happening in this space. And we also want to highlight the incredible experiences of people who are at the forefront of this work every day across the country. We know there are humans behind these headlines, and it's essential to really bring their stories to the fore so we can learn from them, so we can scale what works, and so we can also make strategic decisions to transform the landscape from where we are now to where we all know we want to be. And with that, I want to do two things. One is shout out the powerful Beyond 100K team. Thank you so much for bringing us together today, for being an engine of change and consistently demonstrating what this work looks like, to have really clear-eyed and innovative solutions for our STEM educators to make sure they're thriving in their professions. And secondly, let's just get ready for a fruitful conversation. Please feel free to use the chat liberally. I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Ileana Lindsay from Beyond 100K. She's going to give us a bit more framing on our runner show, our agenda, and our goals for today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mecca. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's dynamic discussion on cultivating STEM classrooms of belonging. My name is Ileana Lindsay, and I am the program manager with Beyond 100K. I'm joined by my colleagues, Maya Garcia, our chief program officer, as well as our moderator for today's event, Gabby Mice, our network manager, and Toyin Ogunle, our manager of external affairs, who will be assisting us with monitoring your questions as they come in, and Rachel Tompkins, our chief external affairs officer. We're excited to share this space with you all in partnership with the Department of Education as we explore key strategies to support BIPOC STEM educators, navigate cultural and community challenges, and examine successful solutions that are already being implemented in the field. Before we dive in, I want to quickly walk you through today's agenda. Though we only have an hour together, we've designed this time to be as valuable as possible. First, I'll outline our goals, norms, and agreements. Then I'll pass it over to Maya Garcia to moderate our panelist discussion. Afterward, we'll have a Q&A session where our panelists will respond to your questions shared in the chat box. We encourage you to share your thoughts, excitement, and questions in the chat, and Gabby will raise these during the Q&A. Then we'll finish with a few closing remarks from Maya and Mecca. At the end of the session, we ask that you please complete our webinar feedback survey to share your feedback and reflections, which will help us shape future programs as impactful as today's. Moving into our goals for today's discussion, our conversation will be guided by three main goals: exploring strategies for creating a supportive environment for BIPOC STEM educators, equipping programs to navigate cultural and community challenges, examining successful solutions and practices being implemented in the field. We have an incredible panel of experts with us today, and they'll share their insights, experiences, and actionable strategies, which I'm sure we're all excited to hear. Throughout the event, we'll be sure to share resources and materials from our speakers that we invite you to explore as they walk us through their experiences. Moving into our community agreements, at Beyond 100K, we believe it's essential to set a few agreements before we begin our dialogue. These agreements are intended to create a space where everyone feels invited to participate authentically and respectfully. So to quickly walk through, our intentions for today are to stay engaged and ask ourselves, how can we show that we value everyone's unique situations, settings, and particular expertise? How can we create opportunities for all voices to be heard and consider power structures? And how can we both engage in meaningful and courageous conversations while acknowledging there isn't a quick fix to the topics discussed today by expecting and accepting a non-closure? As we go through these, I encourage you to share any additional agreements you think are essential for our time together in the chat box. With that, I'll now hand it over to Maya Garcia, who will lead us through our panelist introductions and discussion.
Thank you, Ileana. And I want to just say, Ileana leads our part of our program team and has done a great job organizing this panel. So if you could all join me in just giving her some shine and some thanks as we dig into this topic today. Great appreciation. Without further ado, I'd love to just dive in to this conversation. We know that, and we hope with intention, that this conversation sparks questions, sparks a community conversation, invites you into the chat to share resources and advice or programs that you know are working well. But I also want to make sure that we're highlighting the work of our rich and vibrant Beyond 100K network. For those of you who are not familiar with our organization, I know our Associate Director of Growth, Ava Javid, popped some information about Beyond 100K in the chat. and more people from our organization will share as we go through. And we also have a number of network partners who were lovely enough to join us on this call as well as on this panel. Let me go ahead and introduce you to our amazing group of speakers. I'll be jumping in, trying to keep time, but I really want to make sure that they have time to share their wisdom and their journey with you all. So we have the founder and CEO of Edifying Teachers, Dr. Rudy Ruiz, joining us today on this panel. We have Jalen Jenkins, the Manager of Resident Development, Innovation and Coaching at the Public Education and Business Coalition, based out of Denver, Colorado. And we have the lovely and amazing Khadijah Gaskin-Jones, District Resource Teacher, mainly at the high school level, at Hillsborough County Public Schools. All three sit at different areas of this ecosystem. And we felt like it was really important to have this conversation and bring vantage points so that we could have a range of different visions for this work to present to you today. So we're going to dive into our first question. I'm going to invite each of the panelists to share a bit more about their organizations and the work they're leading as we dig into our first question. And I'm going to ask Rudy to kick us off, if that's okay, Rudy. And so my question is, can you just share a little insight or a personal experience that has shaped your understanding of the challenges and opportunities in retaining BIPOC teachers?
Certainly. Thanks so much, Maya, and happy Hispanic Heritage Month to you and to the community here this afternoon. So glad to be here and part of the conversation. My work and the work that my team is leading through Edifying Teachers is grounded in our lived experiences. My own background is that I'm from Milwaukee and grew up in the inner city of Milwaukee on the south side, and decided after going to Stanford for my undergraduate degree to come back home and to give back into my neighborhood public high schools as a math and computer science teacher. So I was very happily teaching those subjects for 8 years in the classroom. And that really grounds my motivation in this work, but it also grounds the work of those that are part of my team and part of our growing network. And we're so glad to be part of the Beyond100K network as well.
All right, we'll hand it over to Khadijah, if you will, share a little bit about yourself, your motivation, and what drives you in this work.
Thank you so much for having me. As Maya said, that I'm from Hillsborough County Public Schools and I'm in Tampa, Florida. My work actually started in Virginia, and I realized when we were looking at this question that there's several things that actually shaped kind of like my view and my vision for kind of like why I do what I do. One was it started in college, and one of my professors said to me, I hope you're ready to be and you're prepared to be, if not the only one, but one of a few who look like you in your future career endeavors as a scientist. And then as a teacher, I was an AP environmental science teacher in Virginia, and then also here in Hillsborough County. And I realized that there were so few teachers of color at the APSI, the Institute, the training. And that happened in Raleigh, North Carolina, and in Florida. And I'm like wondering where everyone is. And then when I actually started this job as a district resource teacher for Hillsborough County, I really wondered, am I doing the right thing by leaving my classroom? Because I knew the impact I was making in my classroom. That was a big challenge for me. And someone said to me, Khadijah, you absolutely need to be at these tables because you can make even bigger impact on our district, and the work and the passion that you have, you can share it with others. So I realized that I've had that happen over the last 18 years as an educator between Virginia and in Florida.
And we'll hear more about that journey and how that influenced your work in the next section. But I'm going to hand it over to Jalen. Jalen, share a little bit about your connection with this work and this topic with us.
Yes, I mean, I just have to start off by saying that, Khadijah, we have similar paths, so we're going to have to connect even more. As Maya mentioned, my name is Jalen Jenkins. I work for the Public Education and Business Coalition, where we essentially are a nonprofit that's rooted in supporting and sustaining educators in service of the learners. But my particular role has been guided and geared towards supporting and retaining Black and Brown teachers, essentially, because of my experience in Phoenix and in Denver as a science teacher and an instructional coach. So my background is middle school STEM, particularly science, in high school chemistry and bio. And I can tell you in every single space, I was one of the only people of color, not only on the team, but in leadership roles. And so I noticed that there's just a general need for representation. Like we hear the quote all the time, it's hard to be what you can't see. So I've seen the need for that sense of representation, and that is essentially what's rooted me and grounded me in my work.
Thank you all. Now, as we think about creating spaces of belonging, right? Creating environments of belonging for educators, Beyond100K has developed kind of a map of these challenges that are impacting our field, and thinking as we think about retention, recruitment, and preparation of STEM educators. One of the issues, or one of the things we'd love to elevate today, is this conversation about creating classrooms or spaces of belonging, specifically for teachers in their work environment. And I'd love to invite Khadijah to kind of lean into this question around what tools, what resources have supported you as you start to think about navigating this tension or creating spaces to outline some solutions to support BIPOC teachers in your district. So bright spots, initiatives, or successful examples of tools or resources that have helped you navigate that tension around developing a strong teacher work environment.
Absolutely. Thank you, Maya. Well, as you can see on the screen, you're probably wondering what this is. I've always known that I've mattered to a lot of my students of color in science, to all of my students, but particularly my students of color in science. Again, I stated I'm a high school science teacher. And once I became a district representative, I knew that I needed some guidance and support so that I could move forward with very intentional BIPOC initiatives, but I didn't have the resources or the connections to do so. Luckily, I was able to apply for and be able to take a team to the Diversity and STEM Summit that is hosted by the Smithsonian Science Education Center. They do it every year in February, and I would highly recommend that each of you apply to take a team. I believe they'll put out their applications in the fall. But the goal of this summit is to provide educators with a network of others in your field that will then be able to help you focus on one of two things: recruitment or retention of teachers of color in STEM in your particular education spaces. So that's where the intentional work really began. If you look on the next slide, you'll actually see that there are a few main goals. I just mentioned recruitment or attracting and retaining, but also it's teacher empowerment and then building community. And all those things have happened for me and my team. And subsequently, it will be happening for our teachers and our students as we continue through this journey. They've reached out to, I'm not sure exactly, it's on the next slide, how many hundreds of different districts, but we just represented one of many districts when we were there at Howard University in February. And I essentially, the first day, we had to pretty much understand all the systems and all the things. And it was one of those days where like, wow, that was a lot. On day two, we were actually able to look at some of the root causes and then try to figure out our plan and then start to create our logic models. And then on day three, we were able to refine our logic models and create an actual message or a pitch in order to attract stakeholders. And that's what we've done. So we don't have the answers. And every time I actually summarize this work, I feel like I have more questions than I have answers. But I can summarize this work in a few steps. I kind of put together 10 steps that go along with the visual of our logic model that we created at the STEM Summit in February. So first and foremost, we thought it was going to be so easy and that this was going to move fast. But as Maya said earlier, I believe none of this moves quickly. So be prepared for this to take more time, likely twice as much time, to develop an initiative in your particular spaces. Number one, we knew that our goal was to actually retain the teachers of color that we have in high school science for my particular district. That's my space that I have a little bit of, say so over. So it's not for all STEM, but it's just for high school science here in our district. And so what we're working on is we are working on an actual, not just teacher and not just student, but a teacher-student cohort model, which has been sort of guided by the Knowles Teacher Initiative. And it's also rooted in youth development principles that I brought with me from Virginia. So number one, our goal was to invite BIPOC educators to the table. Where are there opportunities for us to actually have these conversations? Number two, have conversations with those educators, with them and not about them. So often we're having conversations about educators, BIPOC educators, but we're not including them at the table. So we want to invite them to the same tables that we've struggled to be at. We want to create safe spaces where we can actually have identity conversations. I've done these conversations at department head meetings. So we've got people that lead their departments. I've also done them in smaller groups at schools. And I've also had these conversations at like a professional studies day with people who wanted to come in and be a part of a very quick session. We had these honest conversations and they were done in safe spaces and they started to build community. And what I did not realize is that our teachers who attended these sessions would get so emotional talking about their burden as a teacher of color in STEM. And they said for many that some were new teachers, some were close to retirement. This was the first time that they've ever had this conversation about being one of the only or one of the few in their science spaces or at their particular school. So that's been really important. We want to also make sure that we provide opportunities to actually talk about and talk through our student teacher population. We never really had much of a conversation of the disproportionate numbers between teachers of color and our students of color in our district. Going to that STEM summit, we were able to do so and really see kind of where our work needed to focus. After we've done all those, we're going to address the need and have honest conversations. This then leads us into recruiting support. This does not happen in isolation. So obviously we need teachers, we need leaders, we need partners, we need community members. And we are working with essentially about 30 teachers at ideally one at each of our high schools. And we have about 30 high schools in our district. The goal is to build capacity, build community. And then we also made sure that we don't want necessarily just for our whole cohort to only be teachers of color, because I actually had a department head say to me, we don't have any teachers of color in our school, but we want to still be a part of this initiative. And she said, I would like for it to be me. And I said, it absolutely should be you because you're an advocate for our teachers and for our students. So I also want to make sure that that's clear. We surveyed the needs of teachers and their concerns and also the strengths. You know, we always ask about like, what's wrong? What do you need? But let's also talk about what strengths and what you bring to the table. Again, we're going to be pouring into our teacher, and that's the next part of this journey. We're providing intentional, professional support, professional learning for this cohort. Again, building capacity, building community, make sure we're pouring into those teachers who really do carry quite a bit of a heavy burden, being one of a few teachers of color in their schools. This has led to opportunities like us being able to take 150 students to actually see Dr. Jane Goodall over the weekend. Our students were able to sit crisscross applesauce, high school students, on the floor right in front of Jane Goodall as she spoke to us about her journey. And our goal was taking not those AP environmental science students, we included them too, but also taking students that would not normally have that opportunity. And that was one of the initiatives of the Jane Goodall Institute. It then concludes with, well, sorry, let me rephrase. First semester, we pour into our teachers. Second semester, our teachers connect with students and they pour into the students at their school. And the goal is that those students will then create diversity and STEM initiatives on their campus and then help us make better decisions and supports for their school communities. I do want to also say that we've made sure that there were direct connections to our science curriculum and curriculum needs from our district. And we also know that it's not just myself as a district resource teacher, but we've also included departments like academic services. We're starting to have conversations with family and community engagement, human resources, and then obviously we need to make sure we're connecting with our building leaders and our teachers. None of this is simple.
None of this is simple.
A lot of people.
It's all very complex. So thank you for elevating this. I want to give our other panelists a chance to weigh in. We are going to come back to this because this is rich. I don't know if you all in the chat agree, but it's like you give us like this landscape view of the entire ecosystem that it involves. None of this work happens in isolation. And I think that's a key message we want people to take away today. So I want to invite Dr. Ruiz to share with us a little bit. Mentorship programs are crucial for retaining BIPOC educators. Creating that pipeline that, especially for our new teachers in the field, or when we think about teacher induction, but even at those critical stages where you think you want to leave the classroom, just having community is really important. So we know that in some spaces, we often fall short in providing the necessary support for teachers. How can schools define mentorship programs that genuinely meet the needs of BIPOC teachers? And what role should racial and cultural affinity play in this support network?
Thanks so much, Maya. I think the title of this afternoon's webinar is, a credit to the Department of Education and Beyond 100K in terms of extending the notion of spaces of belonging beyond what we've been discussing in the field around making sure that young people, our students, have a sense of belonging in the classroom and in the school, to realizing that's so important for our teachers of color as well. And so I talked about the beginning of my journey, my first 8 years, but it was 23 years ago that I was a new teacher. Along the way, I got pulled into school leadership and then district leadership. And so the work that you all are doing, applying a collective impact approach by bringing so many partners together, is the way forward. And what I found when I moved out here to Baltimore, which is where I've been based now for the past decade, and began really researching, trying to understand how can I make this situation perhaps better for the next generation of teachers, the research just kept affirming the importance and the value of mentorship. One of our leaders in the field, Dr. Travis Bristol from UC Berkeley, just pretty recently released a whole handbook, with chapters and chapters from leading researchers around the country, emphasizing the importance of having these affinity spaces and other types of supports, especially mentorship for teachers of color. And so when we look at specifically STEM teachers, what we're finding is that BIPOC teachers are saying, yes, eventually I do want to make a salary that's going to make sense for the degree that I have. But what's really drawing me into the classroom, what's really going to keep me, is helping me understand how can I be successful serving these students from backgrounds like me? How can I navigate this teaching career? And so those are areas that we really find are important. I want to give a couple quick shouts out to just a couple of the folks on the call, including a young man who actually is kind of a career changer. So Jay Crosby, I saw, is one of the folks who's here today. He is taking that step forward. He's working on getting his master's degree from Johns Hopkins in their new teacher residency program, Teaching Well. So he's, one of our African-American students who said, I want to give back to Baltimore City schools. I want to be a STEM teacher. And one of the first things that he shared coming out of this first summer was, I would love to have a Black male mentor. And so that's where we're stepping in to say, hey, we can provide that. And so we know that, like you mentioned, Maya, having somebody who can relate to us on that ethno-racial level is important, but we also know that our Hispanic educators are not a monolith, our Black educators are not a monolith, and so now we're getting deeper and deeper as our network gets bigger to be able to say, but what is your training background, and what is specifically other aspects of how you identify, what are your other identity markers, and giving our mentees a chance to say, here are things that are important to how I identify, and here's what will be great for me in a mentor, and giving them the chance to make that decision around who would mentor them, and we're just getting some great results.
Thank you for sharing that. And we've shared some of the resources you've given us. In addition to, it sounds like we all need to get a book that you just recommended by Dr. Travis Bristol. So we just continue this conversation. Jalen, I didn't know if you want to tag on to anything that Khadijah or Rudy shared, but I know we have a question for you about kind of like continuing this theme of the network of support and thinking about addressing barriers to kind of creating classrooms or spaces of belonging for our BIPOC educators. We know that school leaders play a critical role in setting school culture and community. And Bristol's research emphasizes the critical role of school leadership in creating those environments where BIPOC teachers thrive. So I'd love to hear from you. How can school leaders be more intentional in their practices to not only recruit, but also to retain BIPOC teachers? And what leadership behaviors or policies have you seen and kind of thought about at your organization to be most effective in supporting these teachers?
So I've got, I don't want to say a hefty answer, it's multifaceted. So I'll start with the part about the leadership. We all know that leaders have various facets that they tend to, and various levels of oversight that they provide, but also report to as well. So one of the things that I like to just generally recommend is just leading with curiosity and humility, especially if the leaders have greater proximity to privilege, just because we understand that every group, particularly thinking about BIPOC identifying individuals, have a very different experience from what identifying individuals in education. And so just being curious and humble in the ways that they gather information and advocate accordingly is the first thing that I'll always say. And then thinking from a lens of vulnerability, that is vital and invaluable. And so when that does surface, it's important to listen and believe them. So when someone comes to you with either a challenge or a suggestion, whatever the framing may be, it's really critical to understand the roots of those things. And then also, we don't want to listen without action. So listen, invest, and follow through with the ways in which they can support. It's super critical because a lot of people have experienced being heard, but then the action is not really being showcased. And so that jeopardizes trust and then just general like investment. And so those are the main things. Thinking in terms of what I've seen as successful strategies and things that we're doing, particularly at the organization I'm with. Just to give some context, I am the co-founder of the BEST conference, which stands for BIPOC Educational STEM Thinkers, which I like to streamline and call it facilitated fun for Black and Brown individuals in STEM and in education spaces, because we know all the data. We've lived through the data and the experiences of racism in education and STEM, and it's also doubly as important for us to experience the joy and the community and belonging. And so I really pride myself on just that particular component because I have mentioned before, I've often been one of the first or the only in several spaces, and it's time for there to be greater representation. So one thing that we do in our structure, there's a conference, but then there's monthly virtual affinity groups for teachers to engage with, rooted in community and cultivating capacity, but also there's an element of pedagogy as well, because we know that they are existing in a professional space. So we want to make sure that we're balancing both things. So I think I'll stop there just in terms of that. I think I answered everything now, just to double check.
I think you did. I'm interested to hear either Rudy or Khadijah weigh in on the role of a school leader and how you see them being a critical friend in this space, or it even in your work to set up the infrastructure of the mentorship programs, or to allow teachers to leave the building to participate in the work you're leading, Khadijah. So can you speak a little bit to that role of the administrator?
Absolutely. It's been an interesting journey because here in Hillsborough County, Florida, in our school district, we really haven't had these conversations until recently. And what I found is that I've asked questions about their teachers of color on their campus, and many of them had to pause and think and go, well, I haven't really thought about this. And so for some of our administrators, it is going to be advocates like us to begin to have these conversations, but then to teach them the importance of these conversations. And then I really highly suggest that those administrators at the building level, particularly, have conversations and create safe spaces for those teachers to be able to come to them and say, listen, I'm that teacher when there's difficult kids in our department that gets the phone call that says, hey, Miss Jones, we got this baby, and I think he'd do really well in your class. Acknowledge that teacher. Let that teacher know that you support them and ask them what additional supports they could use, because they pour so much into their students and provide a lot of additional support to them.
Thanks, Khadijah. Maya, I'll add to that as well. One of the resources that was dropped in the chat earlier is from our friends TNTP. And of course, TNTP is one of the leading nonprofits with the 1 Million Teachers of Color campaign. And one of what they released just last week or so was a new set of data that helps communities understand what does our teacher workforce look like in our community, because we know a lot of researchers in some ways have inadvertently not helped the problem by saying, well, we don't have an overall teacher shortage, we just need these teachers here and these teachers there. Well, if my community doesn't have high school math teachers, that's a problem. If this other community doesn't have any Latino teachers, that's a problem. And so better understanding that is really important. So I dropped an article in the chat, but I think when it comes down to the school level leadership support and collaboration, pardon me, we've got to keep in mind that in some cases, for example, here in Maryland, our last data looked at Latino teachers. Half of the schools had no Latino teachers. We know that up in Pennsylvania, half of the schools have no teachers of color, period. And so as our friends that are doing the recruitment work, the grow your own work, are kind of helping convince young people that they can be successful as teachers. They may be the first Latino teacher in the building. They may be the only Black teacher in the building. And that's a difficult space to navigate. And so helping school leaders understand that reality, helping them realize that in terms of sense of belonging, there is obviously a lot of value and sense of belonging in the building. But what we're finding from our work is that even having a safe space that is connecting you with a mentor from outside your building can help you have a sense of belonging in the field. And so we feel like that's really informative and really important for school and district leaders to think about.
Something we've heard in talking with the community, we were our organization had the pleasure of attending HBCU week in Philly this week. And one of the things we heard from one of the colleges was that in rural communities, it can be really isolating. It can feel really isolating. Sometimes you are the only, as you said, Jalen, you're not just the only in the building, you are the only for 100 miles. What are some resources or thoughts you have about how we create community for those that might be either the only in the building, or, how do we bring people together in effective ways? What are some resources you might offer up to this audience to think about how we build community for our teacher workforce, our BIPOC teacher workforce? We're asking for a silver bullet. That's not AI.
Is that okay? Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, so I do believe that identifying those teachers, finding out what their needs are, and then creating a network, even if it's not another teacher at their school, because part of this initiative that we really talked about was that we actually need to create a network. And that's because we all don't have other folks that look like us or that have had the same experience in our departments or in our school or within our community. So there is a need for, and I believe that this can be on a national level, obviously with a lot of the different organizations that are a part of this right now. But I do believe that there's also a lot of value in local networks that need to be intentionally created. And we can do those things. For example, we have our Florida Association of Science Supervisors conference every year. This is where we can start having these conferences or these conversations between multiple districts and then start bringing teachers together, maybe in the state of Florida. So I believe that we need to create networks in our communities, local, regional, and national.
Thanks, Khadija. And I'll add to that if that's okay, Maya. One other shout out, another attendee, Jonathan C.W. Jones, who's on the call here, is a brother of mine in the work. He's actually based in the Twin Cities, Minnesota, but he has provided mentorship, again, for Black male educators in my community here in Baltimore, virtually through the work that we do. And we're getting ready to do some work that's going to do exactly what Khadija mentioned, tap into his network in the Twin Cities and across Minnesota over the next 3 years. So we're going to be growing that network of BIPOC mentors to support BIPOC teachers there. And we believe that too often leaders are overlooking BIPOC teachers and BIPOC educators for the wonderful assets that we bring. And so we want to help change that way of thinking and doing the work.
All right, I'm going to invite Jalen. I know you might have something to add here, but I'm going to invite our audience to populate and pepper us with questions. We want to invite this community online with us today to generate some of those questions for our panelists to start a dialogue. Jalen, do you have a response to my last question while we look at some of the questions that people are elevating?
Honestly, what I was about to type was I second what Khadija and Rudy said, to be honest. They're right on, spot on.
All right. Well, I have two questions from the chat and from the audience. that I'd love to pose. And I think we'll start, Rudy, if it's okay, I'll start with you and then we'll flow across the panel. So outside of schools, how can cultural institutions like museums or community-based organizations support new teachers in meaningful ways? Outside of professional development programs, are there other ways we can connect with community organizations and cultural institutions that could enrich this environment or ecosystem?
Thanks, Maya. Yes, I think there are kind of bi-directional or multi-directional ways of doing that. And I think you all, you mentioned even at the beginning of the call, some examples in certain parts of the country along those lines. But we've got a lot of folks who are working, in out of school time programs that may be STEM focused, may not have thought of themselves as becoming teachers, but are a really great group to prospectively come into the classroom, and vice versa. So teachers, especially new teachers, as they're looking for, how do I engage these young people? How do I get them excited about the content area that maybe I'm career changing from as a professional? There are opportunities to do what used to be called externships, or going out there in the community, doing some project-based learning, and just fostering their own curiosity to really inspire the young people that they're working with. So I think being able to figure out who are those ecosystem connectors in your community is a helpful way to start. And I know Beyond 100K's network is continuing to grow around the country.
Khadija, Jalen, do you guys have responses? Do you have thoughts about that question?
I do, and it's similar to what Rudy was saying. And I'll speak specifically to the experience of BEST. Considering that we are a professional development organization and the BEST conference is rooted to holistically support educators, like I said, pedagogy, practice, community, things like that. Partnering with local organizations, museums, and informal like education sectors has been game changing, in my opinion, for the participants of BEST, because I can talk till I'm blue in the face about what's effective or how to like gauge or it spark some excitement in STEM. And also, why not leverage the brilliance in your community? And so from the Science Museum to the zoo, there have been different spaces where they've been able to enhance capacity by supporting us in this initiative. To bring people alongside and just, generate the excitement for STEM and in and out of the classroom, essentially.
Great. So I have another question. What is your outreach to create or include isolated teachers in a national PLC? Or do you have thoughts about how we might do that? And I think we might have addressed this just a little bit, but if there's any other organizations that you might want to shout out or examples that you might offer our colleague Imani, who elevated that question. What is our outreach to create or include isolated teachers in a national PLC?
Yeah, I'll share if that's okay. And I think, our work continues to evolve. We're a learning organization, and we know that the world is changing, for various reasons, month by month, and certainly even day by day. And so by connecting with current educators, we're continuing to evolve. But one of the ways that we've evolved quite a bit lately is that where we started out with school partnerships and district partnerships, and when we'd get one-off requests from teachers who would say, well, can you provide me mentorship, even though, I don't have any pull with my principal or my district may not see the value in this. I really want it. I really need it. We now have a platform that basically is allowing us to get ready to deploy these 200 plus mentors that we've been, training up these last couple of years. And so now individual teachers can say, I would like that. And we can figure out ways to connect folks across the country and even across the world. Our mantra is rehumanizing education through the power of connection. And we know that mentorship is so critical in any walk of life, but especially when it comes to this profession.
My first mentor was instrumental in, and I didn't realize I wasn't eating as a new teacher. I was getting through my day because you have 3 minutes to make a copy. And the first thing she did was leave my classroom and get me a sandwich. And then she came back, made sure I was nourishing myself as a teacher. And then she connected with me and gave me great feedback. But it was kind of like a reminder, as you're saying, that so often we forget to kind of, we dehumanize, we can dehumanize ourselves or in this work. And we need to kind of remind ourselves about nurturing ourselves in this work. We have a question from Shakia Bland about elders in this space and thinking about how elders and retired educators may get involved in mentorship. And so I'm curious about what you all think about that and that suggestion.
I can just kick off and say, I think it's a beautiful thing. As phases close, there's a lot of wisdom to be passed down, and you may not always have access to the people. And I can tell you the most impactful wisdom, like bite-sized pieces that I've been able to grasp from different people, have come from elders who've been doing it for 20 years. And they can tell you how to do things efficiently, effectively, also while sustaining yourself in the field. So I 100% advocate for it as long as there's capacity and collaboration.
Thank you, Jalen. And Maya, I think your example was awesome, you know, just about seeing you as a whole person. There's so much good work that's been done in the field, and the research has emphasized the importance of instructional coaching as a personal support to teachers. But we know that there's so many more reasons why teachers, and especially teachers of color, are leaving the profession, and those other aspects, especially when we think about, again, bringing in career changers and thinking about folks who either have a family or want to have a family. How do you navigate those different challenges of raising a family? Our holistic approach allows a safe space to have those types of conversations. And to the panelist question about elders, you know, what better resource than our elders? And so with our work, what we're finding, and there's a podcast link to a new podcast conversation on this on our link tree as well. But it's a two-way learning relationship. And so one of our amazing mentors, who's a nationally board certified teacher mentor, she is interviewing me and sharing about her experiences, and you know, she's learning from her mentee as well. And so they're learning from each other, whether it be around technology or co-creation. But it's just a beautiful thing. So we definitely are big advocates for multi-generational approaches.
Learning and approaches, absolutely. My mother, I'll share with you guys, just completed 40 years of teaching this year, and her wisdom is ongoing, and certainly would appreciate kind of sharing her wisdom with others. We have a question about new and upcoming BIPOC teachers and their focus on their first few years of teaching. Khadija, I'm wondering, are there specific goals? You knew I was going to come for you. Are there specific goals they should be looking towards, skills they should be developing, especially as you round out your program, your logic model, and thinking about that work you're leading? How might you answer that question?
Yeah, you saw my head nodding. When we created our logic model, we really did have veteran teachers, novice, and teachers, brand new teachers in mind and consider. And one of the things that we realized is that we weren't providing very intentional support for our new teachers, period, not just our teachers of color, right? So we realized that we need to change our model, but within that model of creating a new teacher cohort model that goes across the year, we knew that those new teachers who are BIPOC teachers needed to also be included in this model of ours. I do also want to share that I saw the question come up in the chat, and they said, like, well, what do we need to do, or how can we prepare as a new teacher? And from someone who is coming from Northern Virginia, and so I know Baltimore, and I've seen some other folks. I came from Northern Virginia to Tampa, right? So I came from Virginia, and then, which is not the South when you're in Northern Virginia, right? But I come to Tampa and I'm in the South. And one of the very first things that I realized right away was that I did not know my community. I'd been a teacher for 8 years in Hampton Roads, which is 3 hours south of Northern Virginia. But when I came to Tampa, I thought I was ready, and I knew what I was going to do because I've been a teacher for 8 years. I wasn't ready. I had to learn Tampa. I had to learn our students. I had to learn this community. I had to learn about the culture around education in this community and what support systems there are or there are not in this community. And that is a big ask of a new teacher. But I really would say, find your partners, find those like-minded individuals on your campus that you know will support the initiatives that you know that your students need in your classroom. That's so multi-layered, but they say avoid the teacher's lounge, right? It's true. Avoid the teacher lounge. Find that teacher who you hear talk about students the way you would talk about your own children, and the way you talk about your teacher. So get to know your community, get to know your kids, find your partners, and then share, and then be that light that then actually creates change within your school community. And it takes time. It takes time.
Any other additions to that? What should new teachers be thinking about? What advice might you give them in this space?
So one of the unfortunately common phrases in the early educator space is the Sunday scaries. And so unfortunately, very often leading into a new week, and people outside of the field of education are shocked to discover that not only are teachers scrambling to figure out, in some cases, what they're going to teach or how they're going to teach it, but also figuring out what resources to use. And so unfortunately, a lot of teachers, especially in under-resourced schools, are spending a lot of time, losing a lot of, the family time, even spending resources out of their own pocket to pay for a resource that may or may not be helpful for them and their students. But what we're finding is that the more we can make it clear to early career educators that 30 minutes with your mentor is going to give you back 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours,
Absolutely.
because they've been through it. They have vetted resources, they have curated resources. We're realizing we can actually give them some of that time back. And some of our friends, from the Center for Black Educator Development, with support from Donors Choose, have recently put out a report that showed that Black male educators, for example, put in more unpaid work hours outside of the work week than any other group. And it's because, again, in their school, they're not getting the support that they need on multiple levels, but they have that commitment to serving their students, serving their families. And so they're putting in those extra hours and trying to figure it out. And again, that's where we believe and are seeing that mentorship can make a difference.
We know that when students have representative teacher workforce, we say representative, but when they have a teacher who looks like them, like you were saying, Jalen, who might live in their community, hopefully they do, right? But has context, that it's a game changer for their experience in STEM. And we can't do this without great teachers. We can't do this without more teachers in this space. I want to thank you all for a rich discussion, perhaps maybe a different discussion than we normally have in this space about the retention of Black, Latina, and Indigenous educators. And but I want to say that the critical tools that you all elevated today about finding that network support, the context in our community, leaning on each other even in this space, finding mentors, creating a logic model in community with others, right? So you can address this issue strategically, maybe start small, but think about it at a large scale after you start to grow that program, Khadijah. Those are all really important moves that you're making, each of you in your spaces, to kind of create those communities that help teachers thrive. I hope in some small part the folks on the call got really rich insights from all three of you and your wisdom and the leadership you're bringing to this space. I'm gonna thank you for your time and all you're doing for the to lead this work. And I'm gonna hand things back over to Mecca to close us out. Thank you today.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Maya, for your beautiful facilitation today and for leading this conversation with so much care. Just want to say a few things very briefly as we close out. At the Department of Ed, I mentioned that this webinar is a part of our You Belong in STEM series, and we have 3 goals through this initiative. One is to ensure that our students have rigorous, relevant, and joyful STEM learning. Another one is about sustaining STEM investment, so the work is ongoing. And sort of our middle and really critical pillar is the goal around ensuring our STEM educators are supported to join, grow, and stay in the field. And so again, that's why we want to make space for this conversation now, because we know there's so much incredible work happening in the field around this. As a brief note, if you are on this webinar and interested in connecting with the Department of Ed to learn more about our resources or programming, definitely email us at STEM, STEM, @ed.gov. You can connect with our team. I just want to conclude by summarizing some of the words of our presenters. I was fiercely taking notes here. It's just wonderful to be kind of re-energized with their powerful learning takeaways. Some things personally that I took away from, I heard Khadijah talking about the responsibility. She said specifically, we have a responsibility to unburden our teachers of color. And that to me was just such an incredible statement. is the importance and value of mentorship, and that's something we can do from whatever seat we're sitting in. Jalen spoke a lot about leveraging community brilliance and how partnering with others is game-changing. And I was also just thinking about how you don't have to be, you know, a CEO or in a particular role to take action and lead from your seat. So again, taking some more comments from our wonderfully expert facilitators. I heard Khadija say, we need to have conversations with and not about educators. And so that is, again, something that we can all do and hold the folks around us to as well. Dr. Ruiz said, foster student curiosity and learn with the ecosystem connectors. There are always people around you who know more about what's going on than you do. Find those people and ensure that they know you and figure out how to connect the dots so that your work has, you know, multiplying impact. And then Jalen said, this was also so powerful, everyone, these really rich comments: listen and believe our educators, and lead with curiosity and humility. Again, work that we can all do and model from wherever we are. So this theme around community, mentorship, leveraging the brilliance of the folks who are doing the work, leading the work with our young people is just so palpable in this conversation, and want to thank our presenters so much for sharing their brilliance and their expertise with us today. That's all we've got. We'll make sure to share this recording and the resources in a forthcoming email to everyone who is registered, so don't worry about that. Thank you all so much for this conversation. Be well.
Thank you.